Hello friends, I am Giri from GIRI'S Tech Hub Pune. Welcome in a session of a Spring Boot tutorial. Friends, in this session, we will discuss about what is the Spring Boot, why use the Spring Boot, and features of a Spring Boot. So friends, now we will start. What is the Spring Boot? We can say Spring Boot is a extension of a Spring framework which eliminated boilerplate code or boilerplate configuration required for setting up a Spring application. Clear? What is the exact meaning of a Spring Boot here, friends? We can say Spring Boot is an extension of a Spring frameworks which eliminated the boilerplate configuration required for us setting up a Spring application. What is the exact meaning of this? Suppose, friends, example. If we use this Spring framework, then we need to write the configuration in a XML file or using some annotation configuration classes. All right, but in the case of Spring Boot, okay, it is internally manageable by Spring frameworks, a Spring Boot framework. Okay, Spring Boot framework. Example, suppose, friends, suppose in the case of a Spring, suppose here we are using a Spring framework. Suppose, consider, friends, this is your Spring framework. Okay, and suppose consider it is a Spring Boot framework. This is your Spring Boot frameworks. Okay. So first of all, we'll compare the Spring frameworks. Okay, in a Spring framework, suppose this is a programmer. Okay, here, suppose consider this is a programmer. Any programmer developing application using a Spring MVC. Okay, then programmer need to write a web.xml manually. Programmer need to write a spring-servlet.xml manually, etc. Means here programmer need to write the all configuration manually. But if you use a Spring Boot, here, okay, if you use a Spring Boot, suppose this is your programmer, okay, so programmer not need to write here. Suppose this is your programmer, right? Here programmer not need to write XML file or any annotations, also annotation configuration internally, right? Means here everything manageable by Spring Boot frameworks internally. This is a major benefit of a Spring Boot. So we can say that's why we say a Spring Boot is an extension of a Spring frameworks which eliminated the boilerplate code of a code required for configurations. Okay, this is called the Spring Boot is here. Okay, so friends, we have one more question. Why use this Spring Boot? So guys, there is a lots of reason to use the Spring Boot, but now here we are discussing some major reasons. Suppose the first benefit of a Spring Boot is a Spring Boot reduce the development period, reduce the lots of time in a development and improve the productivity. Okay, second benefit is a Spring Boot use the embedded server internally. Spring Boot use the embedded server like as Apache or a JT, etc. Means what is the meaning of this, friends? Suppose if we consider this diagram, in the case of Spring frameworks, a programmer need to, configure the server manually. Okay, in the case of Spring frameworks, programmer need to configure the server manually. Okay, but in the case of Spring Boot, we not need to install the server manually and we not need to configure the server manually. When we configure the Spring Boot application, then Spring Boot internally use the embedded server, like as means in Spring Boot contain the Apache or a JT. Means we not need to install the server manually and we not need to configure the server path manually in applications. This is internally managed by the Spring Boot frameworks also. So this is the second benefit. And the third benefit is a Spring Boot can easily configure with a Spring ecosystem. What is the meaning of ecosystem is there? Ecosystem means we can easily manage or we can easily configure the Spring Boot application. Spring Boot application with a Spring JDBC, a Spring ORM, or Spring MVC, etc. etc. The fourth benefit is Spring Boot use the lots of plugins to work with memory databases. Okay, so friends, in some later sessions, we will see some memory databases also. The fifth benefit is a Spring Boot provide the rich support or a huge support to develop the microservices, and provide easy configuration with the Spring Cloud also. Okay, so friend, these are some major benefit of a Spring Boot. There is lots of benefits, but now these are some important benefits of a Spring Boot. Right, so this is the major reason we are using a Spring Boot. So if we use a Spring Boot, right, we have some key features of a Spring Boot here. Right, means Spring Boot provide lots of features. Suppose first, use the YAML configuration. So friends, in this series, some later videos, we will discuss in detail what is a YAML, what is the benefit of a YAML, why use the YAML, and how to configure the YAML in a Spring Boot applications. Second, use the property-based configuration also. Properties file is the second benefit. Then third, okay, we can maintain the different profiles, right, using a Spring Boots. Provide also actuators is also good facility in a Spring Boot. We'll discuss like every features we want to discuss in this video series. Okay. Then we have a fifth is provide a different level of a logging as well as provide internalization concepts. Seventh benefit is a type safe configuration. What is the exactly meaning of a type safe configuration? Okay, because these are some major topics, but in detail we want to discuss later. That we will create a separate video for every features on a Spring Boot. Okay, then next provide a Spring security, etc. That is a n number of features available in a Spring Boot frameworks. Okay, so friends, in next session, we will discuss about how to create the application in a Spring Boot. Okay, thank you friends.